Hi, today we're going to talk about the evidence of evolution. So I'll start off with what is good evidence, and I'll follow up with descriptions of different evidence of evolution. And so in that evidence, I'm going to include things like examples and verified accounts, lab studies, trends and patterns that we've noticed over the years. So we know that evolution is a theory, meaning that it is the best explanation with all the evidence we have. So that's why it's important to understand the evidence of evolution so you can make a judgment. Just like theory of gravity is the best explanation, theory of plate shifting, you can't prove it, but this is the best evidence we have and the best explanation for what it is. This is an accepted scientific fact. Whatever your belief on evolution, realize it is different from origin stories. It may be different from religion. It's not a religion. So keep that in mind when you're learning about the evidence of evolution. It's there to kind of push you to think about what you think, understanding an argument and a counter-argument. So right off the bat, here's a couple qualities of good evidence. Good evidence is recent. Things change, right? We know that the origin of life, that has changed. How people thought where life came from. So some good evidence is recent. It is qualified, meaning that if you are talking about it, you actually know something about it. So as your science teacher, I know a little bit about biology. I went to school for it. I went to UC Berkeley. I studied biology. So look at where this stuff comes from. It's coming from People magazine. It might not be qualified for good evidence. If it's coming from MIT or Harvard, UC Berkeley, a reputable kind of research institution, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, it would be qualified. Unbiased. So a lot of times you'll see research coming straight from a company. For example, hey, oil fracking, or a process where you pull oil out of the ground is totally safe. And who's funding it? The oil company. So make sure you're getting evidence that is unbiased, as someone who doesn't have a role or money involved with the research. You want evidence to be measurable, so meaning that it's not an opinion, it's something that we can see, it's qualitative or quantitative. If it is involving an opinion and you're asking people, you have a survey, you have controls in place to make sure the evidence is good. Lastly, we want to make sure that the evidence is repeatable or it shows a pattern or a trend. So just get it to happen one time. You saw it one time on the History Channel. There is one example of a mermaid. It doesn't mean it's repeatable or a pattern or a trend. We want something that we can see multiple times for it to count as good evidence. So just a quick overview of all the evidences of evolution. We have fossils, which are, the things you find in the ground. So things for fossils might include things like amber. It might include things like bones. It's stuff that's hard, so a lot of your soft, fleshy things won't end up as fossils. Homologous structures, again, homo meaning same, structures that are the same across different species. Vestigial structures, which we'll talk about. Common development, common DNA, and lastly, artificial selection. If you look over here in this box, these are all the things that we're going to try to cover in class. So we'll hit the moth lab, we'll talk about camouflage as evidence of evolution, some examples in humans, along with we'll hit homology and common DNA one more time. These 15 characteristics come from the 15 gems of kind of evidence that we'll read through. Part of Common Core, you'll read through and kind of see more examples of evolution. So not only do we have evidence, we have some hardcore examples that will show you exactly what evolution is going on. So to get a little bit more in detail about fossils, so fossils are hard remnants of life past. And the thing with fossils is you don't get every single piece. So people say, well, if all these things lived, how come we don't see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them? Well, we do, but the issue with fossils is over time we break down. They may not be preserved. You need to be preserved, which means you were in tar at one point, dirt, sediment, that will help preserve the fossil. The other issue with fossils, some people may find them and they get destroyed. A lot of times they'll be under houses or under layers that we don't even know about. So the issue with fossils is basically they're great because we have some hard evidence. A negative of fossils, though, is that they may be hard to find. They don't represent the entire population. So you might just get lucky and find one organism. So that's why some people say, well, why aren't there hundreds of these? But the pro is they are basically remnants. They are solid. They are observable of fossils. Homologous structures. So homologous structures, again, homo meaning same. They're structures with different functions. But the same structure. An example of this would be mammalian forelimbs. So if you were to look at human hands or an elephant's hands, you'd see the same type of bones: a scapula, humerus, a radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals. Just like we have fingers, shrews and wolves also have fingers. So a pro about this type of evidence is you could see it. It's physical. It's observable. There are not really any negatives to this. You just basically have physiology and you compare. Vestigial structures are structures that you no longer use. So vestigial, no use. So with time, structures get smaller. They're not as prominent or as big, as useful as they used to be. There are several examples of this. For example, the appendix in humans is the big one, kind of the big case study. For example, appendixes are huge in quads because they eat a lot of plant material. In humans, we don't have as much plant material, so we don't really use our appendix for that. The form has kind of changed instead of being for plants, so no longer plants. It's now for bacteria. So the function of something is changed. In addition to the appendix in humans, you have hip bones in whales and snakes. So whales and snakes do not need hips. They don't walk around, but they still have hip bones. And one other example would be the coccyx, or the tailbone in humans. You don't have a tail anymore, but we still have a tailbone. What's up with that? So vestigial structures are all about that. What's up with that? Well, you don't really know. Like, you have these things, but what's up with it? You don't know. They're just there. Common development has to do with the fact that when we start, so at birth, so as from zygote prior, we all start the same. We all start as a single cell. We all go through late cleavage, body segments. We have a lot of similarities, or things in common, with development. And that includes things like common genes, for example, the Hox gene, and common processes. And again, similar to before, these are things that you could see. They're observable, they're repeatable, they're the same in humans, monkeys, pigs, chickens. Any animal develops the same. Plants, they develop, if you look at a plant kingdom as a whole, daffodils and trees, they develop very similar. And this has to do with this idea of common development, that we came from something that started the same way, and from there we're changing. We'll also talk about common DNA. So we have, again, the 4 bases. Think back. A, T, C's, and G's. Our DNA is all the same structure. And related to the idea of common genes, you can compare genes using special tools. You can compare the genes and determine similarity, connections, and relationships. So if we were not related at one point, we wouldn't have a common DNA. But because we were all related at one point from a common ancestor, we share this common DNA. And this is particularly important in some examples such as hemoglobin. If you remember from sickle cell anemia, it's the protein for carrying oxygen. And so that must mean that the ability to carry oxygen must have evolved once if hemoglobin is highly conserved, meaning a lot of people share the same one. So you can look at different genes and find out how related you are. This is especially important when thinking of diseases. For example, we try to find common DNA in rats and pigs, trying to find commonalities in things like organs to better help medical needs. Lastly, artificial selection is a huge one that I want to bring up because people are used to seeing dogs. People are used to seeing things like broccoli. And it's crazy because a lot of the vegetables that we eat, I'm not sure on the spelling, a lot of the vegetables we actually eat are a product of natural selection. We would not have broccoli, broccoli, asparagus. They're all modifications of the original plant. Some things that are some extremes, we could look at things like celery, which is nothing but a modified stem. It's all stems that we selected for. You might think of things like lettuce, which are nothing but, modified leaves. And these are all things that humans have intervened upon. And so again, this is something that we can observe. We could see it. It's repeatable. You can see it happening across a whole bunch of different species, not just in plants, but in animals as well. If we look at some of the extremes in dogs. we can see really huge examples of evolution happening, this change in genetics happening because humans are intervening. So to summarize, we've kind of looked through a whole bunch of different evidence, but realized that evidence, in summary, we know that evidence has qualities that make it strong. It can't be from a popular magazine. It can't be from Cosmopolitan or Red Book or, I don't know, Men's Fitness. Not always. These things are based off of research, repeatability, the scientific method. They have some meaning behind them. They have some weight. And there are lots of examples of evolution and evidence for it. You just need to look for it because it's around in a lot of different places. If you keep the definition of evolution to genetic change, it is really hard to refute the fact that things change. So keep in mind, evolution, genetic change, in all these examples, we can see that, and it's not something you can deny or refute. It's out there as part of scientific literacy. So if you have any questions or concerns about how this conflicts with your own life beliefs, please let me know. We will be investigating evidence of evolution a little bit more in depth this week. But this was just kind of a quick overview, a rundown of all the stuff that you might want to look at for evidence in evolution. For more, feel free to reference your book. Feel free to look online. There's a lot involved with evolution. So hope you enjoyed this lecture. You got to learn a little bit more about evolution. If you have any questions, of course, please ask. And I hope you have a great day. Take care. Have a good one. Stay classy, bio students. Stay classy.